Good morning again. I saw that some of you are sitting on the stairs or in the back. There's some seats there if you want to listen to the great conversation while still being comfortable. When confronted with the need for a sustainable shift, companies tend to showcase their CSR programs. But between companies, they differ. And sometimes, even in the same company, departments don't issue it or don't use it the same way. It's not the same thing in HR, it's not the same thing in marketing. And some consumers are very quick to dismiss this as pure and simple greenwashing. So if CSR is not understood the same way everywhere, and if it's not necessarily able to deliver the necessary shift, then perhaps it's not the right tool, and we got to find a new one. So what have we been doing wrong? You know, how can we move forward? What can we find to make this shift more sustainable and more effective? And because the change has both to be a message and a process, we will be talking with professionals who actually deal with both. The Chief Sustainability Officer of Procter & Gamble, Ms. Virginie Helias, the CEO and founder of Goodvertising, the author of a book called Goodvertising as well, Mr. Thomas Kolster, and the Executive Director of Purpose at Edelman, Mr. Andrew Wilson. Thank you very much, all of you, to be here. Let's jump straight into the conversation. Ms. Helias, you're a CSR professional. It's as a Chief Sustainability Officer, this is what you do. What went wrong with CSR?
First, I'm going to disappoint you, Alexandre, because I'm not a CSR professional.
Okay, that's a good start.
I worked 23 years in marketing, brand building and innovation. And my sole purpose at the time was to drive more consumption on Pampers, Ariel, Head & Shoulders Pantene. Now I redeemed myself somewhat in the past 8 years, but it was not in CSR. So I also want to apologize to all of you who have CSR in their title, because I'm going to kill it right now. But don't take it personally. So what's wrong with CSR? Well, just the C, the S, and the R. And it's not just the language, it's the mindset behind. So C in my world means corporate, which is very often disconnected from the business, from the brands. It's not brand activism, as Emmanuel Faber would say. S is social, which can be easily bucketed with charity or philanthropy, which are not wrong, but not sustainable. And R is responsibility, which is another way of saying this is the right thing to do, but says who, you know? Depending on the stakeholders you want to satisfy, there are many right things to do. So it's time now to reframe CSR sustainability from a moral obligation to a business imperative. You know, if CSR is optional, there is no choice with sustainability. If we want to stay in business, we need to change the way we do business, and that means, you know, reinventing how we look at our brands, our innovation, our supply chain.
Is this why, Mr. Wilson, you would advise companies to go from CSR to actually having a purpose?
Absolutely. I agree with a lot of what Virginie would say. I think I'd be a little bit kinder to the CSR profession. You know, it's not a case of it's been wrong, but it's a case of it's not done enough. There has always been a legitimate role for business to contribute to communities, to build healthy societies, to manage the environmental impacts of the business, and of course, at the heart of business, generate the wealth that is the engine of economic and social growth. So CSR is sufficient, but it's necessary, but it's not sufficient. And I reflect on what Joanna was saying from IKEA. The pace of change in the recent past has been phenomenal. You know, unprecedented levels of biodiversity loss, huge problems with social equity and social unrest, and a dramatic shift in power and politics, that business fundamentally has to reappraise its role in society. And that brings us to what a purpose of business is. And for me, the simple way of defining a purpose of a business, to ask the one killer question, is what would the world miss if you weren't here? What is it that you bring to the world uniquely? And when I challenge senior executives on that, they very often talk about, well, we generate wealth, we create jobs, we produce products and services that people want. But of course, yes, that's true, but all your peers and competitors do that as well. What is it that's your unique contribution that ties to your core competence? So let's define that as purpose. And for the purpose of this discussion, I would describe purpose as being the careful, strategic intersection of three things: your business strategy, your impact on people and planet, and your ability to bring about transformative change. So just finally, just expanding those very briefly, that's about your core commercial imperatives, it's about sustainability and the way that you impact, and it's what Solitaire Townsend yesterday called making, what was her term about big social changes. Thank you. Effing big social changes. It's that. You have to align all three. And if you get them in alignment, then you have a strong sense of purpose and you are making a difference in the world.
Mr. Kolster, you've advocated for CSR for years, but like Ms. Helias went from marketing to actually sustainability, you went from CSR to saying that it's not enough, that it is actually, we should move past it, even past purpose. So what is so irrelevant now, according to you, for CSR and even purpose?
First of all, I don't think I really rallied for CSR because I'm definitely together with Virginie on that. I think CSR is stuck in this responsibility framework, and for me, sustainability is all about possibilities and business advantages. But purpose, I think, most of the conversations we have around purpose are kind of stuck in the old marketing mindset, where it's all about, the company is the hero, we're doing this, we're saving the oceans, we are creating circular business models and all of that stuff. So it's kind of very kind of self-centric. It's a navel-gazing exercise. Let's look at the past. Let's look at this past founder who set something interesting. I think what people want right now, what young people want, is that they want change, and they want change to happen much faster. I think the new leadership is really moving away from being a visionary to being an enabler, to understand how can you support people's goals and dreams. And I think this is where most organizations get it wrong, because they ask why, rather than asking who can you help your customers become. And I see all these young people in the room, and I'd actually like to see, using the green cards, whether you rather want a company that supports your dream, if that's the vision, and kind of support that change, because most of the time it's about us. It's about what we do as a company. We have these commitments, and most of the commitments, 2030, 2040, it's not moving fast enough. So that's why I say, purpose, it's a self-centric exercise. We need to focus on people.
You've seen, it seems that your subversion of the public has worked. But besides asking the customers what you can do for them, at one point you also have to have proof, right? You have to be able to show that you're an agent of change. So do you feel this tension between proof and communication in your company, Ms. Helias? How do you manage your corporate purpose and your brand CSR purpose? Because the two are not exactly the same, are they?
So I do not manage our corporate purpose. It was there before me, and it will be there after me. My mission is to keep the company honest and making sure that this lofty purpose is brought to life by specific brand commitment. And today is a big day for us because we are announcing what we call our brand 2030 criteria, which are criteria we are holding now our brand accountable against. And they are very stringent. We are asking each of our brands to innovate across product packaging for responsible consumption, to leverage their voice to promote actively sustainable behavior, to be transparent on ingredient safety, and to reduce their footprint across their supply chain. And we are asking them that needs to be strategically informed by what we call an ambition. And an ambition is a long-term social or environmental commitment that corresponds to a big societal challenge that the brand can uniquely and meaningfully address. And that will inform the brand consumer experience, the innovation and the communication. And as we speak now, each of the brands is defining their ambition. It has to have a very, very often people-centric ambition. Like, just give you an example, Herbal Essence ambition is to enable people to experience the positive power of nature and protect biodiversity. And the proof of this, you may have seen that on our booth, is that Herbal Essence is the first global hair care brand that botanical are endorsed by Kew Botanical Garden, which is the world's leading authority on plant science, which collects 8 million of seed specimens and can recreate biodiversity in case of a major disaster. So this is real stuff. This is real proof. And for each of the brands, we have the same.
And is that proof enough in your perception and perhaps in the public's perception that you are actually becoming a real agent of change? Can you actually literally go to the public and show them this and say, see, we're changing the business, this is not greenwashing?
This is absolutely what we do. We call them tangible acts. And so we don't allow brands to go out with a commitment if they cannot show their tangible acts. You may have seen the Pampers bin on post. The brand is committing to recycle diapers, all over the world, and in 3 major cities within 2 years. This is a tangible proof, and you can see the physical bin.
We've been focusing on companies so far, on their commitments, but you're to dance that tango, if I may say so. The customer, as you said, could be key. So clients, since they have a responsibility, should a brand confront them? Should they say, you gotta change, this is how you should consume now? Or should they rather nudge them, in your opinion?
I think it depends on the company. It comes back to the theme that we've been talking about. You've got to act in a way that's unique to you, that speaks to your core competence and speaks to what your customers want. So sometimes being an activist brand means taking a stand and pushing consumers to think about things differently. Sometimes you can be an advocate and bring people along with you, not just your customers, but your employees and the wider society. Let me give you 2 very brief examples, both from the retail sector. I'll leave aside the well-known examples of Nike, the activist brand, and the Colin Kaepernick campaign that was really, at the leading edge of activism. Let's compare and contrast that with REI, and another American retailer. They sell outdoor equipment, so fleeces, jackets, walking boots. In 2015, they took the brave decision to close their stores on Black Friday. So Black Friday in America is the biggest retail day. They knew it was controversial, but they came up with a very sensible premise. You've bought our kit off us, why don't you now go outside and use it? So they created the opt-outside movement. It was phenomenally successful. It got a huge amount of media coverage. Since 2015, other companies have followed suit, and they've closed on Black Friday. They gave all of their employees a day's paid leave to go outside and use the equipment, and they encouraged others. 7 million people are signed up to the opt-outside campaign. That is advocating. And I just say, they didn't name the enemy. They didn't say what is wrong here is rampant consumerism with Black Friday, but they chose to be a bit more gentle and say, let's just all opt outside. Let's go outside and enjoy ourselves. So it was a nudge rather than an activism. Change that to the Middle East, a retailer called Baby Shop, name gives away what it does. They came up with this concept they realized that in the Arabic language, the word for parenthood has all its etymological roots in fatherhood. So when we speak about parenthood, we're talking about fatherhood. They wanted to challenge that social stereotype, that cultural stereotype, that cultural norm, and they created a new word for parenthood that recognized both mothers and fathers. It was hugely controversial. Within the first week of the campaign airing, it got a huge amount of media coverage, but it was kind of 50-50, positive, negative. People were saying you shouldn't mess with the language, you shouldn't, take that kind of bold move. But they saw the campaign through, they took it to schools, they got poets on board to write new pieces, they had social influencers talking about the campaign, and within 5 weeks, the sentiment turned around, so 90% of the sentiment was positive. And there's millions of people signing a petition to get the word officially recognized in the Arabic language. So that was more taking an activist, helping people change their views on a cultural and social norm.
That goes back to what you were saying about helping the customer, delivering what they need. But does that mean that companies now all have to become activists, that they have to propose an agenda or a purpose or a vision, however you want to call it, rather than a product?
So I don't agree with activist brands. I think that's definitely the wrong approach to become an activist. It's a hero trap. If you put yourself up on the pedestal saying, we're going to save the world, we're going to do this and that, very few brands can do that. Unless you're a legacy brand like Nike, just don't go there. It's plain wrong. I think the example you gave with II, I think you forgot the most important thing in that, because I think II is an excellent example of a company that chose a different path. So on Black Friday, Patagonia decided to donate all their proceeds of that day to environmental organizations. II took quite a different approach. And the most important thing they said was, you know, we're all stuck in big cities like Paris. Maybe you all want to connect with nature just a little bit more. So they looked at the transformation, the role that they can play in people's lives, and said, let's get people to take part. This is not the brand kind of telling you. This is saying to people, let's all do this together. And the amazing thing, the exponential change, went from 2014, 1.2 million people, to 2018, 15 million people choosing to take part voluntarily. So it wasn't like this brand saying, you know, don't do this black and white approach. I think it's counterproductive to the sustainability movement, because the sustainability movement is about inclusion. It's really not about exclusion. And for me, brand advocacy, it's exclusion. It's that thing that drives us, separates us in society. So brand advocacy, never go there. It's a hero trap.
I don't think we're that far. I think it's a continuum. One should see it, you know, brand activism, you admit Nike, you know, can take that stance because they've aligned their core commercial objectives with a... No,
that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying Nike can do that, and Apple can do things like that, because they can break any rule in the marketing rule book because they're that brand. I wouldn't say just because you align your marketing activities, I think it's still a very kind of treacherous path to go down. Don't ever copy the legends.
Yeah, we're going to have to agree to this.
We have questions from the floor.
From the activators, and in fact it's a question, but it's also a statement. We're looking at CSR and asking if we're on the right track now. We know that CSR and sustainability often are interpreted and mean two different things. How can we make sure that moving forward that CSR does mean sustainability?
Yeah, well, I mean, we just need to change the words and the concept that goes with it. I think the key difference between CSR and sustainability, CSR is usually a separate track led by CSR professional and specialists. Sustainability is embedded. It's led by business people who are actually, their job is to make it part of the strategy and the innovation and the communication of the brand. And so to just on what you were saying, it's not about telling people what to, it's about enabling and inspiring and show it through proofs, you know. I mean, just imagine that we touch 5 billion people, you know, with our brands every day. 25 million babies wear our diapers. There is a lot that we can do to drive that into responsible consumption. I talk about recycling, but it's also about reducing the material which the brand is committing to. So you can enable and inspire positive impacts without having to tell people to do it. Just the fact of buying our brands actually help them, drive responsible consumption.
And we're touching there on the definition of CSR, which is sometimes tricky, because when you mention Nike, for example, or even Patagonia, we infringe on this idea that companies can go into social changes. You were talking about sustainability, how consuming is politics. The way you consume is a choice. But can a brand have the legitimacy, and not only legacy brand, to go into fields that are not necessarily just sustainability? So not just a shift in the business model, a shift in perhaps the way we operate or we see society. We've seen brands coming with, as you rightfully said, challenging the way we see parenthood, challenging the way we see masculinity, challenging the way we address bullies. Is that something companies can and are entitled to do in your views?
I mean, the only limit is the authenticity and the credibility. Gillette can take a stand on toxic masculinity, always can talk about what it means like a girl and change the meaning of the phrase. But, you know, P&G cannot say that we are going to end hunger because we are not in food business and we could not do that authentically and meaningfully.
I agree with that, and the thing that I would add to that is it has to be action, not only words. So you can enter into a social dialogue, you can begin to challenge social and cultural norms, but if you're just talking about it, no matter how effectively you're talking about it, if you're not taking action, not making sure it's aligned with all of what you're doing, which is where the sustainability piece comes in, you have to live up to the values behind that you're espousing. Otherwise, you'll be caught out.
You know, I think we've, it's almost like purpose has become this marketing fad, this marketing trend that every brand is trying to embrace some sort of new, exciting conversation around plastic chains. I mean, look at retailers. I'm so tired of seeing retailers talking about food waste and plastic because they're all doing it. And I think the problem is for consumers that they are kind of suddenly seeing purpose as this, you know, oh, it's too much. What can you actually do for me? How can you show me a tangible difference than you could do in my life? And that's why I think that the question, who can you help your customers become, is so pivotal in terms of helping people to achieve some of those things. I think we all kind of have things we want to change in our lives. Maybe we want to eat more vegetarian, plant-based. Maybe we don't want to take that plastic back in the supermarket. So I think this is where there's a genuine way for a brand to make a difference. So I really think that the kind of the best outcome for any brand, the greatest achievement, is really to get people to change their behaviors and minds. And I think that's what brands should aspire to. So making your customers the hero rather than pretending that your brand is the hero, because that's the old approach.
But the markets and the customers are never the same everywhere in the world. So how do you adapt your CSR goals to each market, to each need? Isn't the idea of a global CSR perspective actually by definition false? How do you achieve global scale with particular clients?
Sustainability issues are very similar across different regions. I mean, all our studies say that. The manifestation can be somewhat different, but when we ask people, when you purchase one of our product categories, what are the considerations that you take in mind in your purchase decision? And it was a list of 15 things. And the top 5 were all the same across all the countries, with some ranking which was different, but it was all about either saving money, better for my health, saving water, energy, and reducing the waste I'm producing. And depending on the countries, it could be, you know, different orders. But so, generally speaking, same issues, the way you answer them with local insight, always, you know, to be more relevant to the people. But you can have a global sustainability. For us, it's called Ambition 2030. It's totally global, and it's relevant for all regions.
Global purpose for global companies?
Absolutely. I agree 100% with what Virginie says. The issues resonate wherever you are. We're working with a brand, Domestos, part of the Unilever group of companies. They wanted to take action on water and sanitation. What that means in India is hugely different from what it means in Western Europe, but they are taking action in both those markets in a meaningful way that is addressing social need, so it can be done.
You want to make consumers the hero. Consumers are never the same everywhere. So can we have global purpose or global strategies for individual consumers?
I think it's about creating platforms for change. And when you look at people's lives and the role that you can play in people's lives, I think there's many examples of how you can do that. I think the challenge is that if you are in an FMCG category, if you are Domestos, there's so many other competing brands. So if you look at that list of societal and environmental challenges, most of them are the same. Therefore, we see a lot of the same messages coming out from a lot of those companies. And I think that's why it's so pivotal to move away from that and rather focusing on the role that you play in people's lives, because then your product plays a pivotal part in that equation, and you align profit and purpose. So look at people's lives. I think that's where the secret to building strong, purposeful brands really lies.
Well, it seems that we actually have the 3 faces of even the same problem. And although you seem to disagree, I sort of have a hint that we are on the right track together. Thank you very much for being a part of this panel.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you to